Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing something a little bit different, getting off the series I've been doing with Glenn Kellaway. Today I've got Steve from All the World's a Stage joining me, and we're going to take a look at the year 1974, 50 years ago. We're each going to present 10 albums in our wheelhouse, so to speak, that celebrate being 50 years old. I mean, it's hard to believe time flies like it does. 50 years ago, we were both teenagers. Steve and I are relatively the same age. I was 17, he was 18. So thought that would be a cool thing to do, to recognize some of these albums after 50 years. Steve, how's it going today?
Very good. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, like you said, time flies, man. When I was buying these albums, yeah, I was 18 years old, and they've obviously, because I've selected them, they've stood the test of time. And it's one of those years, 71, 72, 73, 74. Any of those 4 years, I can always make the argument for them being the best year in rock and roll history. And I think these albums will speak for themselves with that.
Absolutely. Just 1974. We both lived through it. Some of the events that happened that year. Nixon resigned following the Watergate scandal. That was probably the big one. Patty Hearst, that whole saga began where she's abducted and then she joins the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army. She's on the run for the next 16 months before she's captured. Just a total thing. It was in the newspapers and the news every day. Side note, the Rubik's Cube was invented in 1974.
Wow, I didn't think it was that old.
Yeah. In sports, you had the Rumble in the Jungle, Ali Foreman, the classic rope-a-dope. It was a huge upset at the time. Foreman was 40-0, and Ali beat him, knocked him out, I think, in the 8th round. Other championship teams from that year, if you're a sports fan, the Miami Dolphins won the Super Bowl, the Oakland A's, their 3rd straight World Series, the Philadelphia Flyers won the Stanley Cup, and the Boston Celtics won the NBA title. In movies, Godfather 2 beat out Chinatown for the Oscar. Towering Inferno was the #1 box office draw, and Mel Brooks had 2 comedies that year, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, both hilarious. TV premieres, Happy Days, Good Times, Rockford Files, Little House on the Prairie, and Chico and the Man all made their debut in 1974. And get this, gasoline, 53 cents a gallon. 53 cents a gallon.
Did you work out the inflation, how that adjusted to what it should be now?
No, I didn't. But
I've done it with an album, and I think the year I used as my pick, I can remember paying $3 for an album in 71. And if I adjusted that inflation to today, that's like $32. Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
So really, it's but you know what? When I look at prices of new vinyl on Amazon then or whatever, $32 is almost not out of line then, when you look at it.
That's right in the ballpark for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were just coming out of the oil embargo in 73. So yeah, because by 74, I know albums were certainly $4 a piece. They may have even been a little higher. Because I do remember when they went just from $3 to $4. That was it. There was no stopping in between, and it was all because of the oil embargo.
Yeah. All right, so we'll start. Steve will go first. We're doing one at a time, back and forth. No ranking, just show an album and discuss it a little bit.
Okay. Well, this artist put out 2 albums in 74. I mean, we were spoiled growing up because in the 70s, bands were putting out 2 great albums every year almost. It was, especially the first half of the 70s, it was ridiculous. Now, I have this album cover, one of the ones hanging on my wall here, but that is Queen 2.
Yeah.
Obviously, their 2nd album, and to me, it's my favorite album by them. It's kind of a concept album. They have a black and a white side that they call it, and it's just a fantastic album. It's beautifully recorded. There's not a weak moment on this album. Every song is good, and it's just You know, you have those certain albums where it's a band just hitting on all cylinders, and that's them. And I think one of the bad knocks about Queen, you tell people you really like Queen, and they're like, I don't like them. But I think people who say that, they didn't hear their first three albums. What they've heard is Fat Bottom Girls and Bicycle, you know, those kind of songs. So
Yeah.
do yourself a favor. If you haven't heard this, listen to Queen 2.
Very good. All right, I'm going to do the softer side of it. Steve's taking care of the rock or the heavier stuff. This is some lightweight stuff, but this is a band I followed since the beginning. This is America's fourth album, Holiday, produced by George Martin of Beatle fame. This is the first one he produced for the band of 7 straight. A couple hit records on here that you may have heard, Tin Man and Lonely People in particular. They were selling lots of records back in those days. The three guys that were military brats got together and released, 7 or 8 decent albums in the 70s, and then their popularity and sort of waned off a bit as the 80s approached, which happened to a lot of bands, I think.
I'm going to keep track here because it'll be interesting to see how many of yours I have versus you have mine.
Okay.
I do have Holiday. Do you have Queen 2?
I do not.
Okay.
You're up.
All right.
Nothing.
I don't know who's winning or losing.
Yeah, I know.
Next up is, like I said, 2 great albums in 1 year by one band, Queen, Sheer Heart Attack. First time I ever saw them was on this tour at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. Opening act was Kansas, and I think the other band was Mahogany Rush. I know PC31 Vinyl Policeman loves this album. This is his favorite Queen album. This was really their first album where they had any success in the U.S. as far as single goes, and that was Killer Queen. But when I was in a band, we used to play 2 songs from this album. We played Stone Cold Crazy and Now I'm Here. And Stone Cold Crazy, I will say that is like one of the first speed metal songs. That song is like breakneck speed. Tough song to play. So that is my next one. Do you have Sheer Heart Attack, Rich?
I don't. The only thing I have by Queen is A Day at the Races, A Night at the Opera, and I have several comps with
those 2 albums. Those 2 albums are what follow the first 3 albums.
Yeah,
you've got the 4th and 5th album, which are good albums, but that first 3 albums for me, that's my favorite stretch of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that grew up at that time and listened to the harder music, they would agree with you on that, because I've heard the same thing from other people. All right, next up, more lightweight stuff. Mr. Dan Fogelberg, Souvenirs, 1974. Now this is extremely laid back, but again, this is what I was listening to in those days. Singer-songwriter. It's produced by Joe Walsh, which is a surprise considering he would take on Dan Fogelberg, but history is what it is. I like the song Part of the Plan, Raven Flies. They're openers on side 1 and 2 respectively. The title track, Souvenirs, as well. So not much to say. A little gatefold as well with the lyrics, as they did back in those days. He died at an early age. He was a pretty good songwriter. I think he got better as his albums went along for a while. Towards the mid to late 70s, a lot of his albums are really strong.
Yeah, I used to have that album. I gave it to Sam St. John because I had a bunch of Dan Fogelberg, and I'm like, you know what? I never listened to this anymore, so I just sent it to him. I think Joe Walsh plays lead on As the Raven Flies, doesn't he? Isn't he?
I'm sure he does. It sounds like his kind of
lead slide on
he's on it.
Yeah, because I had everything of his up through, I think, Windows and Walls. Wasn't that the album, Windows and Walls?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I had everything because I used to date a girl who loved him, so I saw him live a number of times. And I do like that album. I like Netherlands. I like Captured Angel.
Those are the ones I like the best. Netherlands, Captured Angel, and the
Home Free, the debut.
Yeah. And Joe Walsh is actually on several of these, Steve. He's on Part of the Plan too.
Okay.
And
then
Jerry Beckley, who's in America, plays on There's a Place in the World for a Gambler, which is the closer.
yeah, okay. Oh, that's a great song, Place in the World for a Gambler. Yeah, that was always his closing song live. It was really good. Okay, so that technically I don't have it anymore. So
All
right. Up next then is a band that actually Queen opened for on their first U.S. tour, and that is Mott the Hoople and the album The Hoople. If you've watched my channel, you know how much I love Mott the Hoople and Ian Hunter. To me, Ian Hunter, he is the best lyricist this side of Bob Dylan. He can really twist a phrase, and he can be joyful, sad, happy, but he can really be cynical at times, especially to his birth nation. He's not happy about what's transpired over there. During the years he moved to the U.S., I think, God, like 40 years ago. I think he lives in Connecticut. So, but a really good album. I think their best pop tune ever is the album, not the best pop tune ever, but their best pop tune ever, which is Roll Away the Stone, the closing track. And that is about as pop as Mott the Hoople will get. Do you have
very good.
the Hoople?
No, not that one.
You did not. Okay. All right.
Next,
you are.
Next up for me is El Dorado from ELO. This really introduced me to that and the Moody Blues, the way the classical music can be incorporated into modern day music. Just a lot of this flows beautifully. I was listening to this morning. It had the hit "Can't Take It Out of My Head," but can't get it out of my head. But I like the song "Boy Blue," Laredo Tornado. They all, Poor Boy. They all work together in unison. Jeff Lynne, definitely a creative genius, I think. I mean, he put his touch on some of Tom Petty's work and George Harrison and that whole Wilburys thing. As a producer, he's a studio phenomenon, and this is a further example of it. Just a great album to listen to without dashing around and just picking out the hits. It's a fantastic listen.
Yep. Dead on, obviously. Oop, I have it. There it is right there. You can see it hanging on my wall. Yes, definitely a top 10 album of 74 for me. But I didn't take it because the fact that I was going with the heavier stuff. But it would be in my top 10 albums for the year, no doubt about it. And me, it's my favorite album by ELO. And you said pretty much everything you can say about Jeff Lynne. He is a genius.
Yep.
All right, I am up next then. I do have this album hanging on my wall somewhere here, up in the corner there. But this is the 50th anniversary CD box set for Robin Trower's Bridge of Sighs. Very much, he is a Hendrix disciple, no doubt about it when you listen to him. I mean, he even plays the Strat through a Marshall and uses a lot of wah-wah pedal. You know, he initially got his start with Procol Harum. I forget how many albums he did with them, but then he left in 72, I think it was, to go out on his own. Just felt he needed to, and I think he made the right move because he then put out really 4 or 5 solid albums. And he's still going to this day. He is still recording and touring. So
nice.
Bridge of Sighs. You have Bridge of Sighs?
I don't. I'm 0 for 4 so far for your album. But that's why I wanted you to do this, because I know you're going to bring stuff that is outside of my realm, and it's still big in 1974.
Yep.
And the viewers are going to love your stuff way more than they are mine, but that's all right.
Well, they're watching your channel, so they're watching your channel, so they know your taste. So I'm thinking they're going to like your picks too.
Nah, I'm not sure. Anyway, my next album is one I did not have on vinyl because I really had to go back. This is one that I had to go back and get their earlier work, because the first time I knew of Supertramp or listened to Supertramp was Breakfast in America, which came out in 1979. And then I went back and listened to Even in the Quietest Moments, and this here, Crime of the Century, which is really a strong album. It was their first hit record, For some reason, I wasn't paying attention to them in 1974. I can't explain why, but I'm glad I have this now because it's a fantastic album. A couple of FM radio staples on here. What Schools on here? Bloody Well Right.
Bloody Well Right. Yeah.
Dreamer. They're all heavily rotated on the classic rock stations, and deservedly so. Roger Hodgson and Rick Davies are the two creative minds behind Supertramp. So definitely, if you don't have that, give it a spin.
I'm showing my hands because the top album I have here is Supertramp Crime of the Century. Now, I got this when it came out because, in fact, when I was in a band, we used to play the song School. It is, I think, quite possibly, especially the closing track, the title song, Crime of the Century.
Yeah.
It may be my favorite piano recorded ever. I just love the piano in that song, the sound of it. You talk about an album with, forget the fact that it doesn't have a weak song. It doesn't have a weak moment. This is a stellar album. In fact, I bought a new turntable right around Christmas. And this was the first album I played. I played this, Abbey Road, and Close to the Edge. Those were the three albums I played because sonically they're all just like perfect albums. Yes, I do love this album. And a great album cover too.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay. Right. Obviously, we both have that.
That's all right.
Yep.
That proves that we didn't discuss what we were going to show.
Yeah.
For the most part. Next up, I have to put her in here. That's Linda Ronstadt, Heart Like a Wheel. One of the great interpreters of music. Granted, she's not a songwriter, but her voice and her choices are always on the money. On this album, the hit for her was You're No Good, monster hit. And there's some old 50s style music that comes in here. It Doesn't Matter Anymore, which was a Buddy Holly song written by Paul Anka. She covers that. She covers When Will I Be Loved, the old Everly Brothers tune as well. Willin', which is the Lowell George of Little Feat classic. I like Little Feat's version, but I like Linda's just as well. Got a Hank Williams tune on here, James Taylor song. So Linda Ronstadt, one of my favorite female vocalists. I think this is in contention for her best album. There's several really good ones in the 70s, but that's one I wanted to highlight for 1974. And all these albums I bought when they came out, except for the CDs, which are obvious.
I do not have that album, but I bet you Tony at Two from the Trunk has that album.
Absolutely. No question. Tony is, and who's the other guy? Craig from A to Z. Music Haven. Those two guys love Linda Ronstadt even more than I do.
All right. My next pick. I saw them on this tour, and that is UFO and the album Phenomena. And it is the first album with Michael Schenker on guitar. He left the Scorpions after their debut, Lonesome Crow, and then joined them and completely changed their sound because UFO's first two albums, it's kind of space rock and I don't know, I guess you say a little psyche, a little prog, but he brought a completely different sound to them. And he hung around for a while, then left, and then hung around a while and left. He was a revolving door. But when I saw them on this tour, me and a buddy were driving down to the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago, where so many concerts, and we were going to see Kiss. And on the radio, we heard a promo for the concert, and they said the other two acts, and it was actually T-Rex, but also UFO, and neither of us knew who UFO was. So we stopped there was a record store right off the highway that we knew, and so we stopped there, went in to see if they had the 8-track. We grabbed the 8-track to this, listened to it on the way down, and it blew our minds. And they were great live, and I have been a fan now for 50 years.
Wow.
Do you have that UFO album?
I do not.
Well, I know what I'm putting on Rich's Christmas list.
So far, I have one album
You have one.
of yours, and that's the one I showed.
Yeah.
Next up, I'm a big Eagles fan. I have to go with On the Border. This is their what, fourth album or third? This is the third album.
Third, I think.
And
Yeah. One of these
third,
nights.
yeah. And they added Don Felder on one song in particular, Already Gone, to give it a little bit more punch, to get out of that country element that Bernie Leadon was so good at. But eventually, this was like a transition album. They were going to become more of a rock band, and then they followed that with One of These Nights and Hotel California, and the rest is history. But Already Gone, arguably the best song on the album. I like the title track as well, On the Border. James Dean I'm a big fan of that. The cover of Old 55 by Tom Waits is on here, and The Best of My Love was the number one single as well. So solid album for me. Not their best, but one of them.
Well, for me, it is their best album. Well, it's my favorite album of theirs. I don't know if it's their best. I mean, yeah, it'd be hard to argue against Hotel California not being their best, but it's my favorite to listen to, certainly. And the two songs you mentioned, Already Gone, James Dean. I wish the Eagles had rocked out a little more, because when they do an up-tempo song, they're really great songs.
They're really good, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, it's an album I have, so.
Good.
All right, up next then, this follows right on the heels of the UFO pick, because Michael Schenker left the Scorpions, and this is the Scorpions' second album, Fly to the Rainbow. And they had to bring in a new guitarist, and they brought in Uli Jean Roth, who they had on then for 4 albums. And yeah, the sound changes a little different, because also Uli John Roth, he's also like Robin Trower. He's a Hendrix disciple, plays a Fender or a Strat through a Marshall amp with a lot of wah-wah. So their sound changed a little here, but not enough that it didn't turn me off. It's a very solid rock album. And I think it's safe to assume you do not have that album, Rich.
No, I do not.
Okay.
Here's an album that I could not find. I know I had it on vinyl. I must have given it away when I was not collecting vinyl anymore, but I had to replace it with a CD, and that's Bad Company's Debut. Definitely a favorite of mine, always has been. Bad Company, of blues rock, popular in the 70s for their hit songs. The title track, of course, Can't Get Enough, was a big radio hit. I like Rock Steady, Moving On, Ready for Love. Ready for Love, I think, was Mata Hoople originally, and then these guys did it on this album. Paul Rodgers, one of the great lead vocalists in my mind. Him and Simon Kirke came over from Free, and Mick Ralphs from Mata Hoople, and Boz Burrell from King Crimson. I mean, that super group, super album. So wanted to put that on my list.
That is one that I also have. Although I Can't Get Enough, because when I was in a band, we used to play Can't Get Enough. And
you had enough.
We played it all the time. And also I played bass. That is a very boring bass line. But you mentioned Ready for Love. Yeah, Mata Hoople did that on the All the Young Dudes album, because Mick Ralphs wrote that song. And then Moving On, actually, Mick Ralphs wrote while he was in Mata Hoople. And I didn't realize it until just this year. Mata Hoople put out a 50th anniversary box set of All the Young Dudes. And in that box set, one of the extra tracks is Mata Hoople's version of Moving On. And when I was listening to it first time and it started, I'm like, I know this song, but I don't know it this way. So I was shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
You know, but
also,
a very solid album.
Seagull's the closer. I wanted to throw that out too. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange closer, but it is a good song.
Yeah. And it's different than the rest of the album, I think, too. There's an acoustic edge to it that's different.
Mm-hmm. So I am up next. Speaking of when I was playing in a band, we played a lot of their music. I think we played 5 or 6 of their songs. that's Foghat and their album Rock and Roll Outlaws. Now, this album came out before their big album with Slow Ride, Fool for the City.
Yeah.
But I think this is their best album. This and the one right before it, Energized, are my two favorite Foghat albums. That, from the remnants of Savoy Brown came Foghat. I know you gave a thumbs up. Do you have this album, Rich?
I have that one. Yep.
All right. Rich is on the board again after 4 or 5 innings going without a hit.
I like that baseball analogy. Very cool. Next up, little Southern rock, Leonard Skinner's second helping, their second album. I've always loved this album. It's got Sweet Home Alabama on it, but I like the ballad I Need You, Don't Ask Me No Questions, the ballad of Curtis Lowe, of course, The Needle and the Spoon, Call Me the Breeze, the J.J. Cale cover. Just 8 great songs, kick-ass rock and roll, 3 guitar attack going at it. Just fantastic stuff. I like Ronnie Van Zant's style as a lead vocalist as well. He's not the traditional singer, but he's got a lot of presence and very enjoyable to me.
Yeah, I also have that album. And when I was in a band too, we played Sweet Home Alabama, another boring song to play as a bass player. And actually, we used to do our band rehearsals at the house of the brother of a girl I was dating. And the deal was we set up in a spare bedroom. He was single. He just said, go ahead. He gave us a key to the house, said, come, you can practice whenever you want. He says, the only thing I want is when I have a party, I want you guys to be the house band. And he loved Sweet Home Alabama, so we always had to play it for him.
Yeah.
But yes, a very good album. All right, up next for me is, the band makes some big changes here from their previous album to this. And that is Deep Purple and the album Burn. This is their first album of 74, but I'm not choosing their second one also. Ian Gillan and Roger Glover are gone on vocals and bass, and they bring in David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. They get a little funkier sound, but really the next album is where they get really funky. But now you've got Deep Purple with harmonies, and it's a little bit of a different sound, but it is still a really good album. It's in my top 5 of their albums.
Don't have it.
You don't have it. Okay.
I have the only Deep Purple I have is the one with Smoke on the Water, which is
you got Machine Head,
Machine Head. Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
All right. Next up for me, singer-songwriter time, Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark. Love this album. I wish I could write songs as well as she does. Of course, Help Me was the hit, but Free Man in Paris is on here. People's Parties, Car on a Hill, Raised on Robbery is really a up-tempo kind of number. It's outside of her normal ballady style, but really enjoyable. Great lyrics in the middle. So this is following the success she had with Blue and the In Between album, which was For the Roses. A little jazzy influence here on before she really got jazzy. This is that style. That another transition album, I think, before she really goes full blown jazz.
I do not have that album, but I have this album, Blue Oyster Cult, Secret Treaties. To me, this is my favorite album by them. Saw them on this tour at the Willow Springs Ice Arena. And when I say Ice Arena, I don't want you to think that this is someplace NHL teams play. No, this is in suburban Chicago, where they were playing in front of maybe 4,000 people. And actually, because you mentioned Joe Walsh earlier, the opening act was Joe Vitale, Joe Walsh's drummer. It was Joe Vitale and his Madmen. They were the opening act. But this also has what I think is Blue Oyster Cult's best song ever, and that is the closing track, Astronomy. To me, that is their Stairway to Heaven moment. After this, then they would release Agents of Fortune. They'd go a little more commercial, which had the hit Don't Fear the Reaper. Changed their sound a little bit from there on out. And that was my 10th and final. Do you have that one?
I don't.
All right. So grand total is I have 6 of yours. You have 2 of mine.
I got one more to go.
Oh, you got one more. Is that
You
I
went
did?
first.
Did I
Yeah.
do 10? Oh, that's right. I
This
went
is-
first. Okay.
Yeah, this is Late for the Sky, Jackson Brown. I think his best album, lyrical masterpiece all the way through. David Lindley on his slide and guitar and electric guitars, just another genius musician that works so well with Jackson Brown. There's not really hits on here, but a lot of songs that you'll hear him play in concert. The title track, Fountain of Sorrow, of course. For a Dancer, which is this sort of eulogy for a friend that he's mourning, and Before the Deluge, sort of I don't know, they played it a lot at No Nukes, trying to save the earth and all that kind of stuff. Just a wonderful track. Pretty cool cover too, with the car sitting outside of the house with the lights on, and that's referred to in one of the songs. So had to get that in there. Save that one for last.
I also have that, so that gives me 7 of yours.
7-2.
7-2. Now I don't know if that means I have better taste than you, or your taste is better, and I'm hopping on your bandwagon.
No, I think we each have our own taste, and
right. Yeah.
That's the shit we were listening to in 1974. That's what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to mention some other albums that we didn't get to that are also celebrating their 50th anniversary. And The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis, 50 years old. Pretzel Logic by Steely Dan. On the Beach by Neil Young. 461 Ocean Boulevard, Eric Clapton. Kiss, all you Kiss fans, the debut. Diamond Dogs, David Bowie. Not Fragile, BTO. Caribou, Elton John. What else? No Other, which a lot of people in the BC like, by Gene Clark. Get Your Wings, Aerosmith. Planet Waves, Bob Dylan. What Once Were Vices Are Now Habits, Doobie Brothers. What else do I have here? It's Only Rock and Roll, the Rolling Stones. Relayer, Yes. Walls and Bridges, John Lennon. And for Larry Graves, Kimono My House by Sparks. There it is. And there's more. There's many more.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I know Rush had their debut.
There you go.
I'm trying to think which Rory Gallagher album came out the year. It might have been Tattoo in 74. Yeah, it's just a ton of others that I just can't think of at the moment. It's just
a ton.
Like we said at the beginning, just an incredibly solid year.
Absolutely. All right, I just want to wrap this up. Steve, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate the collaboration.
Thank you for having me.
It's been way too long since we worked together on a video. I hope to do it again. Everybody out there, go over and check out Steve. All the World's a Stage, one of the great channels, one of the great personalities in the VC. Please check him out. Give this a like if you like this kind of content. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I appreciate everybody watching. Please leave some comments. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.